you is that you have a very powerful mind. And what's going on is that you make these mental movies about disaster. You'll fail this course, you'll starve, your kid won't grow up well without your being there, and your body responds to the movies of your mind. Because your body cannot tell the difference between what is actually happening and what you are imagining. It's all the same. So he said you have to learn to manage your mind. You have to learn to let go of those negative movies and come into the present moment. And he suggested that I take up yoga and meditation. So I did. The amazing part is that within 6 months, all of the stress-related disorders had disappeared, which of course made me a hideous zealot. Oh well, because I know it works, because I know these little changes can not only affect your body, but just make your life so much more peaceful. Let me give you a couple of examples of studies in the field of mind-body medicine, because the last 10 or 15 years has found a burgeoning of studies looking at how the mind affects the immune system, how the mind affects the heart. I mean, you can't even buy cat food anymore without claims that it boosts the feline immune system. Isn't that true? It's amazing. I used to do research in this field, which is called psychoneuroimmunology, or the effect of the mind on the immune system. The funny thing about that word is that it is not easy to pronounce. Now, what we know with psychoneuroimmunology is, for example, every thought you have affects the immune system. This may sound far-fetched, but there's a great deal of evidence to back it up. Some of you know the work of Dr. Candace Pert, who originally started the National Institutes of Mental Health and was the co-discoverer of the endorphins, the body's own endogenous or internal pain relievers. Candace began the study of the whole field called informational molecules. Great word, huh? Or neuropeptides, neuro being the brain and peptide being a small protein. So we're talking about small proteins made in your brain that bring information to the rest of the body. It turns out that emotions are the link between the body and the mind. Emotions are the link between the body and the mind. Every emotion releases a different mix of neuropeptides. So, for example, if you feel sadness neuropeptides, if you will, are released from the brain, go out through the blood system, and bind to receptors on every cell of your body. If, on the other hand, you laugh and you feel joy, a whole different set of neuropeptides is bound to your receptors just like that in a millisecond. Pretty amazing, isn't it? And I'm sure actually that laughter is the best medicine. Can't you feel the difference in your body just from a couple of laughs? But now we're beginning to understand the molecular underpinnings of how our thoughts affect our emotions and how they affect our body. We're also beginning to understand the mechanisms of stress itself. Fortunately, I can tell you, acute stress is not going to be bad for your body. For example, running off from a mugger. That's the fight or flight response, and we survive because of it. What turns out to damage the body and also damage your mood over a long period of time is chronic stress. And chronic stress, I think we're all chronically stressed because the world is so busy and so crazy. But in addition to that, things that cause us chronic stress are just the obvious thoughts we have during our life. And one of the biggest ones is low self-esteem. All the times that we're mean to ourselves, that we sit around and think, I am a worthless worm. Anybody else would have done this differently. And of course, soon you look around and you realize most of us have thoughts like this. Or when we have thoughts of, I'm helpless in this life. I can't do what I want to do. those are the kinds of things that cause chronic stress over time. And they've studied people who, for example, were abused as children or who were survivors of war. And the chronic stress shows up in high levels of a hormone called cortisone in the blood. Cortisone in high levels can damage the heart, it depresses the immune system, and it also changes your brain, so you actually don't remember things well. This, I think, was a good deal that God made, because if your life was lousy, then you get to forget it. The last little study that I want to tell you was actually done at Yale. And what they tried to figure out was taking a group of people just like us, what made the difference between who was healthy 10 years later and who had taken ill. And of course they thought, well, maybe it's a certain laboratory test that we can do. And believe me, they did a whole battery of tests, physical and psychological. It turned out that the people who stayed well 10 years later had one thing in common. They thought they would be well 10 years later. That was it. That's the power of belief. That's the placebo effect. And you think of that, what an amazing thing. You can give people in pain a sugar pill, and 50 to 60% of them will have less pain. In fact, almost 50% of us will respond to a placebo of any kind. It's the power somehow of our belief, which is an important thing. One of the things I think might be really injurious in our particular culture is that we've become a bunch of unrepentant health nuts. There's nothing that's good for you anymore whatsoever. Isn't that true? You go to put something in your mouth and you're thinking, my God, if I eat it, I'll die. And there may be a part of that that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The key to mind-body medicine is this. Your mind is powerful. It's possible to reduce the stress, to bring your body back to homeostasis by really learning to manage your mind. That we can all manage to do this. And when we do this, when you get the stress off your body, a wonderful thing happens. Nature can heal you in its own way. It was Florence Nightingale, who is the founder of nursing, who said one of the most important parts of medicine is to put people in the best condition for curing, and that is to put them in the condition of homeostasis. Then, if you've got a stress-related illness, that's enough, and you'll heal from it. And if you do need surgery or medication or other things, your body is in the best position to make the best use of them. So that's what we're trying to do. Come back to our natural state of grace. Now that we've talked a little bit about how powerful the mind is, I just want to say that there's a downside to the whole movement of mind-body medicine. And that is people oversimplifying. You know, people saying, oh, gee, if I'm sick, it's entirely because I was thinking wrong. And if I just learn to think right, then I will be well. And truly, I wish it was as simple as that. But it is not as simple as that. I had the chance to be with the Dalai Lama back in 1989 at the first International Congress on Health and Healing, which was in India. And this was the first question that I asked His Holiness, because I've seen how much pain people go through when they blame themselves for getting sick. And I asked him, I said, what should I tell people? And he said, in a very gracious, very respectful way, tell them not to be so simple-minded. And then he gave such a beautiful lecture. He said, don't forget about genetics, don't forget about environment, and don't forget the power of your mind. But it's only one part of many. Many things that impinge on health. And I would also say, in a certain way, you look at the power of the mind of one individual. And you have to realize